Amaya's text was a mistake, sent to a stranger in the middle of the night. But when Gideon replies, her world shifts. He's kind, he's listening, he's hiding something, and he might just be the one. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The morning fog hung low over the rolling hills as Livia Martinez pulled her old blue sedan up the gravel driveway of her new rental home. At 27, she looked both younger and older than her age, her face still youthful but her eyes carrying a weariness that came from seeing too much too soon. "This is it," she whispered to herself, stepping out of the car and taking in the modest farmhouse with its peeling white paint and wraparound porch. A new beginning. The countryside was exactly what she needed. Far from the city, far from the memories, and most importantly, far from Eduardo. Her hand instinctively went to the faint scar on her forearm, a permanent reminder of the last night she spent with him. She had been a nurse at São Paulo's busiest emergency room for 5 years. She'd treated gunshot wounds, car accidents, and heart attacks, but nothing had prepared her for the slow, insidious damage of loving the wrong man. A man who said he loved her while simultaneously destroying every part of her that made her who she was. "Not anymore," Livia said firmly, grabbing a box from the trunk. "That chapter is closed." Her new job at the small rural clinic started Monday, giving her the weekend to settle in. The farmhouse was sparsely furnished but clean, with wide windows that let in streams of morning light. It belonged to an elderly couple who had moved to the city to be closer to their grandchildren, renting it out for extra income. After unpacking her few belongings, Livia decided to explore the surrounding area. The real estate agent had mentioned hiking trails that ran through the property and connected to the neighboring farmland. The air was cool and damp as she walked through the tall grass behind the house, following a narrow dirt path that disappeared into a grove of eucalyptus trees. The silence was healing. No horns honking, no neighbors arguing, no Eduardo banging on her door at 3 a.m., demanding to know where she'd been. About a mile into her hike, as the morning fog began to lift, Livia heard something that made her stop in her tracks. A soft whimpering sound like a wounded animal or a "Hello?" she called out, moving toward the sound. "Is someone there?" The whimpering grew louder, turning into full-blown sobs. Livia quickened her pace, pushing aside low-hanging branches until she came to a small clearing. There, sitting on a fallen log with his head in his hands, was a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old, with dark, curly hair and dirt-smudged cheeks. His feet were bare and his knees were scraped and bleeding. "Oh my goodness," Livia gasped, immediately switching into nurse mode. She approached slowly, not wanting to frighten him further. "Hey there, sweetheart. Are you lost?" The boy looked up, his eyes wide and red from crying. His lower lip trembled as he nodded. "I'm Livia," she said gently, kneeling down to his level. "What's your name?" the boy hiccuped. "Be Benicio," he managed between sobs. "That's a nice name," Livia smiled, taking off her light jacket and wrapping it around his shoulders. "Where do you live, Benicio? Are your parents nearby?" "Papa," the boy whimpered, pointing vaguely behind him. "I was looking for Pipoca." "Pipoca, is that your dog?" Benicio nodded miserably. "She ran away and I followed, but now I can't find her or Papa." "Well, don't you worry," Livia said, carefully examining his scraped knees. "We're going to find your Papa. Can you walk, or should I carry you?" "Carry?" the boy asked hopefully. Raising his arms, Livia scooped him up, surprised at how light he was. His small arms wrapped around her neck, and she felt a surge of protectiveness that caught her off guard. She hadn't allowed herself to think about children, not since Eduardo had made it clear what he thought about ruining her body for a baby. "Let's head toward town," she said, adjusting Benicio on her hip. "Someone there will know where you belong." The boy rested his head on her shoulder as she walked, his tears dampening her shirt. "Are you an angel?" he asked suddenly. Livia laughed, the sound unfamiliar even to her own ears. How long had it been since she'd really laughed? "No, sweetie, I'm a nurse. I help people who are hurt." "My knee hurts," Benicio informed her solemnly. "I know it does. When we find your Papa, I'll clean it up properly for you." The nearest town was a small cluster of buildings about 2 miles from her new home. As they emerged from the tree line and approached the main road, Livia could see activity up ahead, a group of people gathered in front of what looked like a small general store. As they got closer, she realized they were organized in some sort of search party. A tall man in the center was giving directions, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of panic. "We'll split into 3 groups. Roberto, take your team along the eastern trails. Miguel, cover the road toward the highway. I'll head back toward the river." He knows not to go near the water alone, but he's just a little boy and he was upset about the dog and— "Excuse me," Livia called out, quickening her pace. "I think I found who you're looking for." The man turned, and Livia felt an unexpected jolt as their eyes met. He was in his early 30s with broad shoulders and the weathered tan of someone who worked outdoors. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark brown and filled with such raw emotion that she had to look away. "Papa!" Benicio cried, squirming in Livia's arms. "Benicio!" The man rushed forward, his face transforming with relief. He reached for his son, and Livia carefully transferred the boy into his father's strong arms. "Where were you? I've been looking everywhere." "I was following Pipoca, but I got lost," the boy explained, burying his face in his father's neck. "But the angel found me." The man looked at Livia properly for the first time, taking in her simple jeans and t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes, which she knew still held the shadows of her past. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Slightly. I'm Cayo Mendez. This land, it can be dangerous if you don't know it well. There are ravines, wild animals." He trailed off, hugging his son tighter. "He was about 2 miles east of here, near a grove of eucalyptus trees," Livia explained. "I just moved into the old Santiago farmhouse. I was exploring when I heard him crying." "The Santiago place? That's just beyond my property line." Cayo shifted his son to one arm and extended his other hand. "I don't know how to thank you, Miss Livia Martinez." She took his hand, surprised by the warmth and strength in his grip. "And no thanks necessary. I'm just glad he's safe." The small crowd that had gathered began to disperse now that the crisis was over. An older woman approached, her resemblance to Cayo unmistakable, the same dark eyes, the same strong features, though hers were set in a perpetual frown. "Is this the woman who found him?" she asked, looking Livia up and down with thinly veiled suspicion. "Yes, Isis. This is Livia Martinez. She just moved into the Santiago place." Cayo turned to Livia. "This is my sister, Isis." Isis nodded, curtly. "How fortunate you happened to be wondering exactly where my nephew was lost." Livia felt a chill at the woman's tone, but kept her expression neutral. She'd dealt with enough hostility in her life to recognize it instantly. "Just good timing, I guess." "His knees need cleaning," Livia added, addressing Cayo directly. "The scrapes aren't deep, but they should be disinfected." "Of course." Cayo glanced down at his son's injuries. "We have a first aid kit at the house. Would you mind taking a look? You said you're a nurse?" Before Livia could respond, Isis interjected. "I can handle a scraped knee, Cayo. I've been patching him up since the day he was born." Cayo seemed torn, looking between his sister and Livia. Finally, he said, "Livia found him, Isis. The least we can do is offer her some coffee while she helps with his knees. Besides, it would be good for Benicio to thank her properly." Isis pressed her lips together, but didn't argue further. "Fine. I'll go ahead and prepare something to eat. The boy must be starving." She walked away stiffly, her disapproval evident in every step. "I'm sorry about my sister," Cayo said quietly. "She's been protective since my wife passed." The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken grief. "I understand," Livia said, though in truth she couldn't imagine the depth of his loss. "And really, the coffee isn't necessary." "Please," Cayo insisted, his eyes meeting hers again. "You saved my son. You've earned much more than coffee." There was something in the way he looked at her, not with the predatory interest she'd grown wary of, but with a genuine gratitude that made her uncomfortable in a different way. Like she'd done something extraordinary when all she'd done was what anyone would do. "All right," she agreed. "Coffee sounds nice." As they walked toward his truck, Benicio reached out from his father's arms and grabbed Livia's hand. "Will you?" Fix my knees with magic band-aids? He asked hopefully. Livia smiled, feeling something warm and forgotten stirring in her chest. I'll see what I can do, she promised. Caio's farm was larger and more prosperous looking than she'd expected. The main house was a sprawling single-story building with a wide veranda and carefully tended flower beds. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance she could see cattle grazing in green pastures. As they pulled up to the house, a small brown and white dog came bounding across the yard, barking excitedly. "Pipoca!" Benicio squealed, struggling to get down from his father's arms as soon as they stepped out of the truck. So the troublemaker came home on her own, Caio said, shaking his head as he set his son down to greet the dog. Inside, the house was warm and lived in, with comfortable furniture and family photos on every surface. Most featured Benicio at various ages, but on the mantel was a larger portrait that caught Livia's eye. Caio with his arm around a beautiful woman with Benicio's curly hair, all three smiling widely. "That's Helena," Caio said quietly, noticing where her gaze had fallen. "Benicio's mother." "She's beautiful," Livia replied, unsure what else to say. "She was." Caio's voice was flat, controlled. "Car accident 2 years ago, drunk driver crossed the center line." The blunt explanation told Livia that he'd had to give it many times before, that he'd found a way to state the facts without falling apart each time. "I'm so sorry," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. From the kitchen came the sound of cabinets being opened and closed with unnecessary force. Isis appeared in the doorway, her expression tight. "Coffee's ready, and I've put out the first aid kit in the bathroom." "Thank you, Isis," Caio said. "Livia, the bathroom is down the hall to the right. I'll bring Benicio." The bathroom was large and dated, with blue tile and brass fixtures that had gone out of style decades ago. Livia washed her hands thoroughly while Caio sat Benicio on the counter. "This might sting a little," she warned as she dampened a cotton. "A ball with antiseptic." "But you're a brave boy, aren't you?" Benicio nodded solemnly, though his lower lip trembled when she began cleaning the first scrape. To distract him, she asked, "So, Pipoca is quite the explorer, huh?" "She chases rabbits," Benicio explained, wincing slightly. "And sometimes she doesn't come when I call. That's why we have rules about not following her alone," Caio added gently but firmly. "Remember?" "I remember now," the boy said sheepishly. Livia worked quickly, cleaning both knees and applying antibiotic ointment before covering them with adhesive bandages that had cartoon characters on them. "There we go, all fixed," she announced, helping Benicio down from the counter. "Just keep them clean and dry for a couple of days." "Thank you," Caio said, his hand briefly touching her shoulder, "for everything." In the kitchen, Isis had set out coffee and a plate of homemade cookies. She'd also made Benicio a sandwich, which he was devouring with the enthusiasm of a child who'd had an adventure. "So, Livia," Isis began, her tone conversational but her eyes sharp. "What brings you to our little corner of nowhere? Most young women are heading to the cities, not away from them." Livia took a sip of her coffee, buying time. She'd prepared a simple answer for this inevitable question. "I needed a change of pace. I was working in a busy emergency room in São Paulo, and it was intense. When I saw the opening at the clinic here, it seemed like perfect timing." "And there was nothing else?" Isis pressed. "No one you're running from?" "Isis," Caio warned, his voice low. But Livia met the other woman's gaze steadily. "We all have pasts, don't we? I just decided mine wasn't going to determine my future." Isis seemed taken aback by the directness of her response. She opened her mouth to say something else, but Benicio interrupted. "Can Livia come see my room? I want to show her my dinosaurs." The tension broke as all three adults looked at the little boy, his face now clean and hopeful. "Maybe another time, sweetie," Livia said gently. "I should really get back home. I still have a lot of unpacking to do." "Oh," Benicio's face fell. "But you'll come back, right?" Livia glanced at Caio, unsure how to respond. To her surprise, he smiled. A real smile that transformed his serious face. "Livia's going to be living next door, more or less," he told his son. "And she starts work at the clinic on Monday. I'm sure we'll see her around town. And you can bring Pipoca to visit me sometime," Livia added. unable to resist the boy's disappointed expression. "If your dad says it's okay." Benicio immediately turned to his father with pleading eyes. "Can we, Papa? Can we visit Livia?" Caio laughed, a sound that suggested it wasn't something he did often. "We'll see," he said, ruffling his son's curls. "But for now, why don't you go put on some shoes while I walk Livia to her car?" As they stepped outside, away from Isis's watchful gaze, Caio seemed to relax slightly. "I apologize for my sister," he said. "She's been like a mother to Benicio since Helena died. Sometimes she forgets where her responsibilities end." "It's fine," Livia assured him. "She's protective, I understand that." They reached her car, and an awkward silence fell between them. There was something Livia couldn't quite define in the air, not attraction exactly, though Caio was undeniably handsome. It was more like recognition, as if they both sensed a similar wound in the other. "I don't know how to thank you," Caio said finally. "When I realized he was missing..." He shook his head, unable to complete the thought. "You don't need to thank me," Livia replied. "Really?" Caio looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Then he reached out and gently took her hand in both of his. The gesture was surprisingly intimate, though nothing about it felt inappropriate. "You saved my son," he said, his voice low and intense. "And for that, you've gained my eternal gratitude at the very least." Livia felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. She slipped her hand free and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm just glad I was there," she said simply. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Caio stood in the driveway watching her go, with Benicio now at his side, waving enthusiastically. Something tugged at her heart, a feeling she couldn't quite name. For the first time in a long time, Livia felt like she might have found not just a new home, but a place where she actually belonged. Monday morning arrived with a gentle rain that turned the dusty roads to mud. Livia navigated carefully to the small clinic in the center of town, her windshield wipers squeaking rhythmically. The Esperanza Rural Clinic was a single-story building with a fresh coat of white paint and blue trim. A small waiting room held a dozen chairs, most of them empty when Livia arrived. The head nurse, Donna Matilde, was a round woman in her 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. She greeted Livia warmly and showed her around the modest facility: 3 exam rooms, a small laboratory, and a medication dispensary. "We're not equipped for major emergencies," Donna Matilde explained as they toured. "Those get transported to the regional hospital, about an hour away. But we handle everything else: checkups, vaccinations, minor injuries, chronic disease management, and home visits. We serve a lot of elderly folks who can't easily come to us." Livia nodded, taking it all in. It was a far cry from the chaotic emergency room she was used to, but there was something appealing about the simplicity and direct impact of rural healthcare. "Our doctor, Dr. Renato, comes 3 days a week," Donna Matilde continued. "Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The rest of the time, it's just us nurses making the calls about who needs to be seen immediately and who can wait." By mid-morning, Livia had settled into a rhythm, taking vital signs and medical histories from patients before they saw the doctor. The work was straightforward but fulfilling, and she appreciated the unhurried pace that allowed her to actually talk with each person. Around 11, the clinic door opened and a familiar face appeared. Caio entered with Benicio in tow, the little boy's face lighting up when he spotted Livia. "Livia!" he exclaimed, breaking free from his father's hand and running toward her. "Look! My knees are all better." Livia smiled, kneeling down to his level. "Let me see," she said, examining the bandages she'd applied 2 days earlier. "Those look great. Did you keep them clean like I told you?" Benicio nodded proudly. "Papa helped me cover them with plastic when I took a bath." Caio approached, more slowly, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry to barge in. We're here for his regular checkup, but he was so excited when he found out you work here." "It's no problem at all," Livia assured him, standing up. "It's good to see you both again." Donna Matilde appeared from one of the exam rooms, her eyebrows raised with interest as she observed the interaction. "Caio and young Benicio, you're right on time, and I see you've already met our new nurse." "Yes," Caio confirmed, his eyes briefly meeting Livia's. "Livia found Benicio when he wandered. Off on Saturday. We're very grateful to her, is that so? Donna Matilda's expression was one of barely concealed delight, as if she'd just discovered a juicy piece of gossip. Well, Livia, why don't you take them to room 2 and get them started? Dr. Renato will be with them shortly. In the exam room, Livia went through the routine of weighing and measuring Benicio, checking his blood pressure, and asking Caio about any concerns. He's been having some nightmares, Caio admitted quietly, while Benicio was distracted with a toy from the clinic's small collection. About getting lost in the woods, I think Saturday scared him more than he lets on. Livia nodded understandingly. That's normal after a frightening experience. Has he talked about it at all? Not really, he doesn't like to show when he's afraid. Caio's voice was tinged with pride and concern. He's like his mother that way. The mention of Helena created a brief, heavy silence. It might help if he could. Process it through play or drawing, Livia suggested. Sometimes kids find it easier to express feelings that way, rather than talking directly about them. Caio looked at her with genuine interest. You seem to know a lot about children. Part of the job, Livia shrugged, though in truth, her knowledge came more from her own childhood experiences than her nursing training. Kids are often our bravest patients, but they need different tools to deal with scary things. Before Caio could respond, Dr. Renato entered, a tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle manner. Livia excused herself to prepare for the next patient, but not before Benicio made her promise to say goodbye before they left. Later, as Caio and Benicio were checking out at the front desk, Livia approached to fulfill her promise. Benicio immediately hugged her legs, an unexpected gesture that made her heart swell. Dr. Renato says I'm growing super fast, he informed her proudly, and I only cried a little bit when I got my shot. That's very brave, Livia praised him, patting his curly head. Caio watched the interaction with an unreadable expression. Then, as if making a sudden decision, he asked, "What time do you finish today?" Livia blinked in surprise. "Around 5, why?" "I was thinking, maybe you'd like to come for dinner." He rushed on before she could respond. "As a proper thank you for Saturday. Nothing formal, just a meal. Benicio would love it, and it would give you a break from unpacking." Livia hesitated. She'd promised herself she would be careful in this new place, build a life focused on her work and her healing, not rush into new relationships of any kind. But the hopeful look on Benicio's face made it hard to refuse, and there was something about Caio that didn't trigger her usual wariness. His invitation seemed genuine with no hidden agenda. "That would be nice," she found herself saying. "Thank you." "Great," Caio smiled, looking both pleased and slightly surprised that she'd accepted. "We'll expect you around 6. You remember how to get there?" "I remember," Livia confirmed. As they left, Benicio turning to wave enthusiastically, Donna Matilde sidled up beside Livia with a knowing smile. "Caio Mendes is a good man," she said, her voice low and confidential. "Been through a lot with losing Helena like that. The whole town's been worried about him and that boy." Livia felt a rush of embarrassment. "It's just dinner," she clarified. "A thank you for helping his son." Donna Matilde patted her arm. "Of course it is, dear. But you know, in a small town like this, even just dinner gives people something to talk about." The rest of the day passed, in a blur of routine tasks, but Livia's mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. By the time she drove up the now familiar gravel driveway to Caio's farm, her stomach was tied in knots. This was ridiculous, she told herself firmly. It wasn't her date. It was just a neighborly dinner, a thank you gesture, nothing more. But as she stepped onto the veranda and raised her hand to knock, the door swung open to reveal not Caio or Benicio, but Isis, her expression making it clear that Livia was not a welcome guest. "Oh," Isis said, her surprise quickly masked, with a tight smile. "I didn't realize my brother had invited company tonight." "Isis," Livia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Good evening. Caio invited me for dinner." Isis's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, I can see that. How unexpected." She stepped back reluctantly, allowing Livia to enter. "Caio is in the kitchen. He didn't mention we'd have a guest." Before Livia could respond, Benicio came tearing around the corner, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Livia, you came!" He threw his arms around her legs, nearly knocking her off balance. "I promised I would, didn't I?" Livia laughed, ruffling his curly hair. Caio appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. His expression softened when he saw Livia, but tensed again when he noticed his sister's rigid posture. "Livia, welcome," he said warmly. "I see you've met the welcoming committee." He shot Isis a pointed look. "I was just surprised, that's all," Isis said tightly. "You didn't mention we were having company tonight." "I told you this morning," Caio replied, his voice low but firm, "when I asked you to pick up extra meat at the market." Isis flushed. "I must have forgotten." She turned to Livia with a thin smile. "You'll have to forgive me. It's been a busy day." "Of course," Livia said, though she suspected Isis hadn't forgotten at all. "Can I show Livia my dinosaurs now, Papa?" Benicio asked, tugging at Livia's hand. "Sure, son," Caio nodded, "but only for a few minutes. Dinner's almost ready." As Benicio pulled her toward his room, Livia heard Isis whisper harshly to Caio, "You barely know this woman. What are you thinking, bringing her into our home?" She didn't hear Caio's response, but the tension was unmistakable. It made her wonder if accepting the invitation had been a mistake. Benicio's room was exactly what she'd expect for a 4-year-old boy. Walls painted sky blue, a bed shaped like a race car, and toys scattered across the floor. He proudly showed her his collection of plastic dinosaurs, naming each one with surprising accuracy. "This is T-Rex, and this is Triceratops, and this one is, the one with the long neck." "Brachiosaurus," Livia suggested. "Yeah, that one. Papa taught me all their names, but sometimes I forget." "You know a lot for a boy your age," Livia praised him, sitting cross-legged on the floor as Benicio arranged the dinosaurs in what appeared to be a battle scene. "Papa says I'm smart like Mama was," he said matter-of-factly. "Do you want to see her picture? I have one right here." He pointed to a framed photograph on his bedside table. Livia picked it up carefully. It showed a beautiful woman with Benicio's curly hair and warm smile, holding a much younger Benicio on her lap. "She's very pretty," Livia said softly. "She's in heaven now," Benicio informed her solemnly, "because a bad man hit her car. But she can see me from heaven, and she sends me signs sometimes." "Signs?" Livia asked. "Like butterflies and rainbows. Aunt Isis says those are Mama's ways of saying hello." His small face grew serious. "But sometimes I forget what she looked like for real, not in pictures." The simple honesty of his statement made Livia's heart ache. She knew all too well what it was like to lose someone you loved. "That happens sometimes," she said gently. "But your papa and your pictures help you remember, right?" Benicio nodded, then suddenly brightened. "Papa's making his special barbecue tonight. It's the best in the whole world." He grabbed her hand again. "Come on, I'm hungry." When they returned to the living room, the atmosphere had changed. Caio was setting the table with a cheerful demeanor that seemed slightly forced, while Isis was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Aunt Isis?" Benicio asked, looking around. She remembered she had a church meeting tonight, Caio explained, not meeting Livia's eyes. She said to start without her. Livia didn't believe it for a second. Clearly there had been an argument, and Isis had left rather than share a meal with her. "I hope it wasn't because of me," she said quietly, when Benicio ran to wash his hands. Caio sighed, placing the last plate on the table. "Isis is protective. She's been my right hand since Helena died, helping with Benicio with the house. But she sometimes forgets that it's my life, my decisions." "I understand," Livia said, though she felt uncomfortable being the cause of family tension. Family dynamics can be complicated. "Do you have family nearby?" Caio asked, seeming eager to change the subject. Livia felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "No, my parents died when I was in nursing school. Car accident." The half-truth came easily. She'd said it so many times it almost felt real. "I have a younger sister, Marina, but we're not close right now." Not close was an understatement. The last time Livia had seen Marina, her sister had screamed that she never wanted to see her again, that Eduardo was the only one who truly loved her. The memory still made Livia's stomach churn with guilt and helplessness. I'm sorry, Kaio said, his eyes reflecting genuine compassion. It's not easy being alone. Something in his voice, the raw understanding, made Livia look up and really see him. Not just as an attractive man or Benicio's father, but as someone who truly understood loss. The moment was broken by Benicio bounding back into the room. I'm super clean now. Can we eat? I'm starving. Dinner was delicious. Grilled meat, roasted, vegetables and homemade bread. Benicio dominated the conversation, jumping from topic to topic with the endless energy of a child. He told Livia about his preschool, his friends, and how his father was teaching him to ride a pony. Papa says when I'm bigger, I can have my own horse, he declared, his mouth full of food. Chew first, then talk, Kaio reminded him gently. Livia watched their interaction with a warm feeling in her chest. Despite his loss, Kaio was clearly a good father, patient, attentive, and loving. It was refreshing after her experience with Eduardo, who viewed children as burdens, and whose own nephew had been terrified of him. After dinner, Benicio insisted on showing Livia his favorite cartoon before bedtime. The three of them settled, on the couch, Benicio between them, as colorful animated characters danced across the screen. Halfway through the show, the boy's head began to nod, and soon he was fast asleep, leaning against Livia's arm. He's out, Kaio whispered, smiling fondly at his son. Let me put him to bed and then maybe we could have coffee, unless you need to get home. Coffee sounds nice, Livia replied, carefully shifting so Kaio could lift the sleeping child. While Kaio was gone, Livia took the opportunity to examine the living room more closely. There were photos everywhere. Kaio, Helena, and Benicio in happier times. One in particular caught her eye, the couple on their wedding day looking young and impossibly happy. Helena had been beautiful, with an open, friendly face and the same curly hair as her son. In the photo, Kaio was looking at her with undisguised adoration, the kind of look Livia had once foolishly thought Eduardo gave her, before she understood that what she'd mistaken for love was actually possession. That was 7 years ago, Kaio said softly, returning to the room. Sometimes it feels like another lifetime. You looked very happy, Livia observed. We were. He moved to the kitchen to start the coffee. For a while, there was something in his tone that made Livia curious, but she didn't press. Everyone had their stories, their private pains. She, of all people, understood the need for secrets. How are you settling into the Santiago place? Kaio asked as he handed her a steaming mug of coffee. It's been empty for a while. It's coming along, Livia replied, grateful for the change of subject. Still needs some work, but it already feels more like home than my apartment in the city ever did. And the clinic, how was your first day? Good. Different from what I'm used to, but in a good way. I like having time to actually talk to patients, get to know them. They settled into an easy conversation about the town, the people, the rhythm of rural life. Kaio told her about his cattle farm, how it had been in his family for generations, how he'd modernized it after taking over from his father. And Isis, has she always lived here too? Livia asked cautiously. Kaio sighed, running a hand through his hair. Isis moved in after Helena died. She was living in the city, working as a secretary, but she gave it all up to help me with Benicio. His expression was a mixture of gratitude and frustration. I don't know what I would have done without her those first few months. I was a mess, but now you're ready to stand on your own, Livia finished for him. Exactly, but Isis doesn't see it that way. She's made this her life now, and the idea of change scares her. Change scares most people, Livia said softly. It's why we stay in situations long after we should leave them. Their eyes met, and Livia had the distinct feeling that Kaio understood exactly what she wasn't saying, that he somehow saw through her carefully constructed story to the truth beneath. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Moments later, the front door opened, and Isis stepped in, her eyes narrowing when she saw Livia still there. Oh, I thought you'd be gone by now, she said, not bothering to hide her displeasure. It's getting late. Kaio stood up, his expression hardening. Livia and I were having coffee, Isis. She's welcome to stay as long as she likes. Of course, Isis replied, her smile tight. But don't forget you have an early meeting with the cattle buyers tomorrow. And I need to speak with you about some family matters. The emphasis on family was deliberate, a clear message that Livia was an outsider. Actually, I should be going, Livia said, standing up. Thank you for dinner, Caio. It was delicious. I'll walk you to your car, he offered, shooting his sister a warning look. Outside, the night was clear and cool, a blanket of stars stretching across the sky. They walked in silence for a moment, the tension from inside dissipating in the way. Open air. I'm sorry about Isis, Caio said finally. She's not usually so protective, Livia suggested with a small smile. I was going to say rude, but protective is more charitable. He shook his head. Please don't let her behavior discourage you. Benicio really enjoyed having you here, and so did I. There was a warmth in his voice that made Livia's heart beat a little faster. It had been so long since she'd felt this kind of gentle connection with someone, no demands, no possessiveness, just genuine appreciation for her company. I enjoyed it too, she admitted. Benicio is a wonderful child. You're doing a great job with him. Some days are better than others, Caio said with a rueful smile, but thank you for saying that. They reached her car, and an awkward silence fell between them. In the moonlight, Caio's face looked younger, less burdened. Would you like to do this again sometime? He asked suddenly. Maybe without my sister's disapproving glares. Livia hesitated. She liked Caio, liked his honesty, his obvious love for his son, the way he made her feel safe rather than on edge. But she had come here to heal, not to jump into another relationship. As friends, Caio added quickly, seeming to sense her hesitation. Benicio would love it, and honestly, it's nice having someone to talk to who doesn't know every detail of my history. Put that way, it was hard to refuse. I'd like that, she said softly. His smile was worth the risk. Good. Maybe this weekend I could show you some of the trails around the property, ones that are less likely to contain lost children. Livia laughed. That sounds perfect. As she drove home, her headlights cutting through the darkness, Livia found herself smiling. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful, like maybe, just maybe, she could build a new life here. One where she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next blow to fall. The rest of the week passed in a pleasant routine. Livia found her rhythm at the clinic, getting to know the regulars, elderly farmers with arthritis, young mothers with fussy babies, workers from the nearby factory with minor injuries. Donna Matilde proved to be a font of local knowledge, filling Livia in on the town's history and characters during quiet moments. The Mendez family has owned that land for 4 generations, she told Livia over lunch on Thursday. Caio's father was a traditional man, hard but fair. He wasn't thrilled when Caio brought home Helena. She was a city girl, a teacher with modern ideas. But she won him over eventually. And Isis, Livia asked, trying to sound casual, has she always been so intense? Donna Matilde chuckled. Isis always lived in her brother's shadow. He got the farm, the education, the perfect marriage. She spent years working meaningless jobs in the city, never quite finding her place. When Helena died, it was like Isis finally had a purpose, being the woman of the Mendez household, taking care of her brother and nephew. So she sees me as a threat, Livia concluded. She sees any woman as a threat, dear, especially one as young and pretty as you. Donna Matilde patted her hand. Don't take it personally. Isis is a good woman at heart, just scared of losing her place in the world again. Livia nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. There was something in Isis's eyes when she looked at her, not just protectiveness, but almost hatred. As if Livia represented something beyond just a potential disruption to her life with Caio and Benicio. On Friday afternoon, as Livia was finishing her shift, the clinic door opened to reveal a familiar small figure. Livia, Benicio called, running toward her. Papa said I could come say hi. Behind him, Caio entered more sedately, nodding to Donna Matilde before turning his attention to Livia. We were in town getting supplies, and someone insisted on stopping by to see his favorite nurse. I'm glad you did, Livia smiled, kneeling to Benicio's level. How are your knees, all healed up? All better, the boy confirmed, showing her his now unbandaged knees. And guess what? Papa said you're coming to our house tomorrow to see the trails. That's right, Livia nodded, glancing up at Caio, who looked slightly embarrassed. I hope that's still okay, he said. Benicio's been talking about it all week. It's more than okay, Livia assured him. I've been looking forward to it. Great. How about around 10? We could pack a picnic lunch. Sounds perfect. As they left, Benicio turning to wave enthusiastically, Donna Matilde raised her eyebrows at Livia. Just neighbors, huh? Livia felt her cheeks warm. It's not like that. He's just being friendly to the new person in town. Donna Matilde hummed skeptically. Well, friendly or not, it's good to see Caio coming out of his shell. That man has been walking around half alive since Helena died. The next morning dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for hiking. Livia dressed in jeans, a light t-shirt and sturdy boots, pulling her hair back in a ponytail. She tried to ignore the flutter of nervousness in her stomach as she drove to Caio's farm. This time it was Caio who opened the door, a warm smile spreading across his face when he saw her. Right on time, he said. Come in. We're just finishing the picnic preparations. Inside, Benicio was carefully placing apples into a backpack, his tongue poking out in concentration. I'm helping, he announced proudly when he saw Livia. Can see that, she laughed. You're doing a great job. Where's Isis today? Livia asked, trying to sound casual as she helped Caio wrap sandwiches. Women's group at the church, he replied, a hint of relief in his voice. All-day affair, thankfully. Thankfully? Livia raised an eyebrow. Caio lowered his voice. Let's just say she wasn't thrilled about our hiking plans. She thinks I'm moving too fast, whatever that means. She's just looking out for you, Livia said diplomatically, though she was secretly glad Isis wouldn't be joining them. Once the picnic was packed, they set out across the property. Caio led them along a well-maintained trail that wound through pastures where cattle grazed lazily. In the morning sun, Benicio ran ahead, stopping to examine interesting rocks or bugs, calling for them to hurry up and see this. He has so much energy, Livia observed, watching as the boy chased a butterfly across a meadow. Too much sometimes, Caio agreed, with a fond smile. He gets that from Helena. She was always in motion, always planning the next adventure. You must miss her a lot, Livia said softly. Caio was quiet for a moment. I miss the person she was when we first met, he said finally, his voice low. The last year before the accident, things were different, we were different. Livia didn't know how to respond to that. It sounded like there was more to the story of Caio and Helena than the picture-perfect marriage everyone described. Sorry, Caio said quickly. That was, I don't usually talk about that, with anyone. It's okay, Livia assured him. Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who wasn't there, who doesn't have preconceived ideas about how you should feel. Caio looked at her with gratitude. Exactly. Everyone here knew Helena, knew us as the perfect couple. No one wants to hear that reality was more complicated. Before Livia could respond, Benicio came running back, tugging at her hand. Come see the special place, Livia. Papa's going to show you our picnic spot. The special place turned out to be a small clearing beside a bubbling stream, sheltered by ancient trees that created a natural canopy. Wildflowers dotted the grass, and the sound of water over rocks created a peaceful backdrop. It's beautiful, Livia breathed, taking in the idyllic scene. Mama loved it here, Benicio informed her as he spread out the picnic blanket with his father's help. We used to have picnics here all the time. Livia shot Caio a questioning look, wondering if this was inappropriate, bringing her to a place so closely associated with his late wife. But he smiled reassuringly. It's a good place for making new memories too, he said quietly. They ate their picnic lunch with Benicio providing a steady stream of chatter, telling Livia about his friends at preschool, his favorite toys, and his plans to become a veterinarian or maybe an astronaut when he grew up. After lunch, the boy's energy finally seemed to flag, and he curled up on the blanket for what Caio called his adventure nap, a brief rest that always followed their outdoor excursions. With Benicio sleeping peacefully, Livia and Caio sat by the stream talking in low voices. He told her about growing up on the farm, his time studying agricultural engineering in the city, how he'd returned home with plans to modernize the family business. "And then I met Helena at a friend's wedding," he continued, a faraway look in his eyes. "She was so different from anyone I'd known, educated, sophisticated, full of dreams. I fell hard and fast." "How did she adjust to farm life?" Livia asked, genuinely curious. "Better than anyone expected," Caio replied. "She loved the open space, the connection to nature. She started teaching at the local school, got involved in community projects. For a while it was perfect. There it was again, that qualification. For a while, what changed?" Livia asked gently. Caio was silent for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, staring at the flowing water, he said, "About a year. Before the accident, Helena started changing. She became distant, secretive. She'd disappear for hours without explanation. When I asked questions, she'd get defensive, accuse me of not trusting her." "That must have been difficult," Livia said, thinking of her own experience with Eduardo's jealousy and control. "I thought maybe she was unhappy here, regretting giving up city life, or maybe—" He trailed off, then shook his head. "It doesn't matter now. The accident happened, and suddenly all those unanswered questions didn't seem important anymore." Livia sensed there was more to the story, but she didn't push. Everyone had the right to their secrets, especially painful ones. "What about you?" Caio asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. "What brought you from a big city hospital to our little clinic? And don't say a change of pace. There's more to it than that. I can tell." Livia felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She'd become good at deflecting this question, at telling just enough of the truth to satisfy curiosity without revealing the ugliness beneath. But something about Caio's openness, about the peaceful setting and the feeling of safety she had in his presence, made her want to be honest, or at least more honest than she'd been with anyone else here. "I was in a relationship," she began slowly, choosing her words carefully, "with another doctor at the hospital, Eduardo. It was not healthy." "Not healthy how?" Caio asked, his voice gentle but his eyes alert. Livia stared at her hands, noticing a small scar on her palm from where Eduardo had once slammed her hand in a drawer during an argument. "He was controlling, jealous. He wanted to know where I was every minute, who I was talking to. If I didn't answer his calls immediately, he'd show up at my apartment, demanding explanations." "That sounds frightening," Caio said quietly. "It was. But it happened so gradually that I didn't see it clearly until—" She took a deep breath. "Until my sister Marina moved to the city for college. She stayed with me at first, and Eduardo hated it. He said she was coming between us, that she was a bad influence. When I defended her, he hurt you," Caio finished, his voice tight with anger. Livia nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "That was the first time, but not the last. And somehow, he convinced Marina that I was the problem, that I provoked him, that I was mentally unstable. She moved in with him, cut off contact with me. That's why you said you're not close with your sister. Yes, the last time I saw her, she had a bruise on her face. When I tried to talk to her about it, she screamed at me, said I was jealous because Eduardo had chosen her over me." Livia's voice broke slightly. "I tried to get her to leave with me, but she wouldn't, and I couldn't stay anymore. Not when he'd turned my own sister against me." "So you came here," Caio said, understanding in his eyes, "where no one knew you or your history." "Where I could start over," Livia nodded. "But I still worry about Marina every day. I've tried calling, texting, but she's blocked me everywhere." "I'm so sorry," Caio said, and she could tell he meant it. No one should have to go through that. Livia wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her best efforts. "I don't usually talk about this. I don't want people to see me as a victim." "I don't see you as a victim," Caio said firmly. "I see you as incredibly brave. It takes courage to leave, to start over. Many people never find that strength." His words touched something deep inside her, a place that had been wounded by Eduardo's constant criticism and manipulation. For years, she'd been told she was weak, unstable, worthless without him. To have someone see strength in her choices felt like a healing balm. "Thank you," she whispered, finally meeting his eyes. The moment stretched between them, charged with understanding, and something more, a connection that went beyond mere attraction or friendship. In Caio's eyes, Livia saw recognition of her pain, but also appreciation for who she was beyond it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he leaned toward her. Livia found herself meeting him halfway, drawn by a force she hadn't felt in years. Genuine. Desire untainted by fear. Their lips were inches apart when a small voice broke the spell. "Papa? Livia? I'm thirsty." They pulled apart quickly as Benicio sat up on the blanket, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Of course, buddy," Caio said, his voice slightly rough as he reached for the water bottle. "Here you go." Livia busied herself repacking the picnic items, her heart racing and her cheeks warm. What had she been thinking? She'd come here to heal, not to rush into another relationship, no matter how kind Caio seemed. The walk back to the house was quieter than the journey out, with Benicio now riding on his father's shoulders, occasionally pointing out birds or interesting clouds. Livia walked slightly apart, trying to sort through her conflicting emotions. As they approached the farmhouse, Livia noticed another car in the driveway beside Caio's truck, a sleek black sedan that looked out of place in the rural setting. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked, a thread of unease running through her. Caio frowned, setting Benicio down. "No, Isis isn't supposed to be back until dinner time." As they got closer, the front door of the house opened, and Isis stepped out, her expression tense. Behind her was a man Livia couldn't see clearly at first. "Caio, there you are," Isis called, her voice strained. "You have a visitor." The man stepped forward into the sunlight, and Livia felt the blood drain from her face. She stopped dead in her tracks, a cold fear washing over her. It was Eduardo. He smiled when he saw her, that charming, dangerous smile that had once made her heart race for very different reasons. "There you are, my love," he said smoothly. "Your sister was so worried about you. We've been looking everywhere, Eduardo." Livia's voice came out as barely a whisper, her legs suddenly feeling too weak to support her. "What are you doing here?" Eduardo stepped forward, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. He was just as she remembered, tall, impeccably dressed, with that confident smile that had once made her feel special, and now made her stomach turn with fear. "Looking for you, of course," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Marina is worried sick, we all are." Caio looked between them, confusion giving way to understanding as he registered Livia's pale face and trembling hands. "You're Eduardo," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Dr. Eduardo Vasconcelos," he corrected smoothly, extending his hand. "And you are?" Caio ignored the outstretched hand. "How did you find this place?" Eduardo's smile never faltered. "Small towns, my friend. Everyone knows everyone's business. When I asked at the clinic about the new nurse, they were more than happy to tell me where to find her." He glanced at Isis, who stood watching with undisguised interest. "Your sister has been most helpful. She told me all about how Livia has been spending time with your family." Isis at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "He said he was Livia's fiancé," she explained defensively, "that she had run away after a nervous breakdown." "That's a lie," Livia said, finding her voice at last. The familiar anger that always followed Eduardo's manipulations gave her strength. "We were never engaged, and I didn't have a breakdown. I left because—" "Livia, please," Eduardo interrupted, his voice gentle but his eyes hard with warning. "You're not well. Marina and I have been so worried. The doctor said you might be confused, might create these fantasies." "Papa!" Benicio's small voice broke through the tension. He was clinging to his father's leg, looking up at the adults with confusion and fear. "What's happening? Is Livia okay?" Caio placed a protective hand on his son's head. "Everything's fine, buddy. Why don't you go inside with Aunt Isis for a while?" Isis hesitated, clearly torn between wanting to witness the drama and following her brother's request. Finally, she held out her hand to Benicio. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go see if Pipoca wants a treat." The boy reluctantly let himself be led away, looking back over his shoulder at Livia with worried eyes, until the door closed behind them. "You need to leave," Caio said to Eduardo once Benicio was inside. "Now." Eduardo raised his eyebrows. I'm afraid I can't do that without Livia. Her sister has given me medical power of attorney. Livia needs professional help, which is why I'm here to take her home. That's not true, Livia protested, her heart racing. Marina would never— She signed the papers last month, Eduardo said smoothly, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket. After your last episode, Livia felt the world spinning around her. This couldn't be happening. She'd been so careful, covering her tracks when she left Sao Paulo. She'd changed her phone number, used cash, stayed off social media. How had he found her? I don't believe you, Caio said firmly, stepping between Livia and Eduardo. And even if Marina did sign something, Livia is an adult. She makes her own decisions. Eduardo's smile turned cold. I was hoping we could handle this civilly, but if you insist on interfering in a private medical matter— He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Perhaps you'd like to speak to Marina yourself. He dialed a number and put the phone on speaker. After 2 rings, a female voice answered. Eduardo, did you find her? Livia felt her knees buckle at the sound of her sister's voice. Marina? Livia? There was a pause, then Marina's voice hardened. You need to come home. Eduardo is trying to help you. Marina, please, Livia begged, tears streaming down her face now. You know what he did to me, what he's doing to you. Stop it, Marina snapped. Stop making up these stories. Eduardo loves me. He's the only one who stood by me while you've been running away from your problems. The doctors said this might happen, that you'd try to turn people against him. Caio had heard enough. He stepped forward, took the phone from Eduardo's hand and ended the call. I think you should leave now, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. For a moment, Eduardo's mask slipped, and Livia saw the rage behind his pleasant exterior, the same rage that had left bruises on her body and fear in her heart. For so long. This isn't over, Eduardo said quietly. Livia knows I always get what I want in the end. With that thinly veiled threat hanging in the air, he turned and walked back to his car. The 3 of them stood in silence as he drove away, dust billowing behind his expensive sedan. As soon as he was out of sight, Livia's legs gave way, and she sank to the ground, her whole body shaking with sobs. Everything she'd built here, the new life she'd started to create, it was all crumbling around her. Eduardo had found her. He would never stop. And now he had Marina convinced that Livia was the unstable one. Hey, Caio's voice was gentle as he knelt beside her, his hands warm and steady on her shoulders. He's gone. You're safe. I'm not safe, Livia whispered. He found me. He'll always find me. Not if I have anything to say about it, Caio replied, his jaw set with determination. Come inside. We need to talk. Inside the house, Isis was in the kitchen with Benicio, helping him make a sandwich. She looked up when they entered, her expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. Benicio, why don't you take your sandwich to your room and play with your dinosaurs for a while? Caio suggested, his voice forcibly light. The boy looked at Livia with wide eyes. Are you crying? Did the mean man make you sad? Livia wiped her cheeks, trying to smile for his sake. I'm okay, sweetheart. Just a little upset. When I'm upset, Papa gives me a hug, Benicio informed her solemnly. It always helps. Before Livia could respond, the boy had wrapped his small arms around her legs in a fierce hug. The simple gesture of comfort from this innocent child broke something open inside her, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Thank you, Benicio, she managed, ruffling his curly hair. That does help. Once Benicio had reluctantly gone to his room, Caio turned to his sister, his expression harder than Livia had ever seen it. What were you thinking, Isis? Letting that man into our home? Isis crossed her arms defensively. How was I supposed to know he was lying? He showed up looking for Livia, said he was her fiancé, that she'd run away after some kind of breakdown. He had her sister on the phone, for God's sake. And you didn't think to call me first? Caio demanded. To check if what he was saying was true. Why would I? Isis shot back. It's not like you and Livia are— She trailed off, looking between them. Unless there's something you haven't told me. That's not the point, Caio said, though his cheeks reddened slightly. The point is that you let a complete stranger into our home around Benicio without knowing anything about him. I was trying to help, Isis protested. He seemed concerned and he had documents. He's dangerous, Livia interrupted quietly. Both siblings turned to look at her. Eduardo is not who he pretends to be. He's controlling, manipulative, and yes, violent. That's why I left Sao Paulo. That's why I came here. Isis's expression softened slightly. I didn't know. He seemed so normal, charming even. They usually do, Livia said bitterly. That's how they get away with it for so long. Caio ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. What do we do now? He knows where you live, where you work. I have to leave, Livia said, her heart sinking at the thought. She'd found something. Here, peace, purpose, and maybe the beginnings of something more with Caio and Benicio. But Eduardo's appearance had shattered that fragile new reality. It's not safe for me to stay, and I won't put you and Benicio at risk. No, Caio said firmly. Running isn't the answer. It just gives him power over you. We need to stand and fight. You don't understand, Livia protested. Eduardo is relentless, and he has resources, money, connections. Now he even has Marina convinced that I'm mentally unstable. All the more reason to stay and prove him wrong, Caio insisted. If you run again, it only reinforces his story that you're unstable, that you need to be helped, whether you want it or not. Livia hadn't thought of it that way. She'd been running for so long that it had become her first instinct when threatened. Besides, Caio continued, his voice softening, you have something here that you didn't have before. What's that? Livia asked. People who care about you, people who know the truth. He reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. You're not alone in this, Livia. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. For most of her life, she'd been fighting her battles alone. The idea that someone might stand beside her, might believe in her without question, was almost too much to hope for. I care about you too, Isis said quietly. Both Livia and Caio turned to her in surprise. I mean, I don't know you well and I've been difficult, but I would never have let that man in if I'd known the truth, and I certainly won't help him hurt you now that I do know. Livia was stunned by this unexpected support from the woman who had seemed to dislike her from the moment they met. Thank you, she said simply. Isis nodded, then squared her shoulders. I should check on Benicio and maybe make some coffee. I think we all need it. She headed down the hallway toward Benicio's room, leaving Caio and Livia alone in the living room. She's right, you know, Caio said once his sister was out of earshot. She does care in her own way. She's just afraid of change, of losing her place in our lives. I understand that fear, Livia admitted. When you've lost so much, you hold on tighter to what remains. Caio looked at her thoughtfully. You're very forgiving, considering how she's treated you. Livia shrugged. Isis wasn't wrong to be cautious. She doesn't know me, and I haven't been entirely honest about my past. You had good reason to keep it private, Caio pointed out, and now that it's out in the open, we can deal with it together. Together. The word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. But Livia couldn't let herself be swept away by what might be, not when Eduardo's threat still loomed over her. What if he comes back? She asked quietly. What if he tries to force me to go with him? Then we get the police involved, Caio said firmly. We file for a restraining order, we document everything, but most importantly, we don't let him isolate you. That's what men like him want, to cut you off from anyone who might support you. Livia knew he was right. Eduardo's control had been most complete when he'd convinced her that no one else cared about her, that no one would believe her if she told the truth about their relationship. Okay, she said finally. I'll stay, but I need to be careful. Eduardo has friends in high places, doctors who might back up his claims about my mental health, police officers who owe him favors. Then we'll be careful, Caio agreed. But we won't hide. Living in fear is exactly what he wants. The rest of the day passed in a strange, heightened state of awareness. Isis made lunch, Benicio played with his toys, and Caio made calls to a lawyer friend about restraining order procedures. On the surface, it was almost normal, but underneath, Livia could feel the tension. the knowledge that Eduardo was out there somewhere, planning his next move. By evening, she was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained. Caio insisted she stay the night in their guest room rather than return to the isolated farmhouse. "It's just until we know what Eduardo's planning," he explained. "You'll be safer here with us." Too tired to argue, Livia accepted the offer. Isis lent her a nightgown and some toiletries, her earlier hostility replaced by a wary solidarity. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was a start. After dinner, as Caio was putting Benicio to bed, Livia found herself alone with Isis in the kitchen, helping with the dishes. The silence between them was uncomfortable but not entirely hostile. "Can I ask you something?" Isis said finally, as she dried a plate with unnecessary thoroughness. "Of course," Livia replied cautiously. "This man, Eduardo. How did someone like you end up with someone like him?" The question wasn't asked with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. Livia considered how to answer. "It didn't happen overnight," she said finally. "When we first met, he was charming, attentive. He made me feel special. By the time I saw the real him, I was already isolated from friends and family. He'd made me doubt myself, my perceptions, classic abuser tactics, but when you're in it, you don't see the pattern." Isis nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for what I said before about you running from something I didn't understand." "How could you?" Livia said gently. "I didn't exactly volunteer the information. Still, I was harsh, judgmental." Isis set down the dish towel and turned to face Livia directly. "The truth is, I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of losing Caio and Benicio," Isis admitted. "After Helena died, they became my whole world. I gave up my life in the city to be here for them. And then you showed up, and suddenly Benicio is talking about you constantly, and Caio is smiling again in a way I haven't seen in years. I'm not trying to replace you," Livia assured her. "Benicio needs his aunt, and you and Caio have a bond that goes back a lifetime. I know that, logically I know that." Isis sighed. "But fear isn't logical, is it? And I've been afraid for so long, afraid of being alone, afraid of failing Caio and Benicio when they need me most." For the first time, Livia saw Isis clearly, not as an adversary, but as a woman who had sacrificed her own life to care for the family she loved, who was terrified of having that purpose taken away. "I'm not here to take your place," Livia said softly, "but maybe if you're willing, there's room for both of us in their lives." Isis gave her a small, tentative smile. "Maybe there is." Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Livia found herself unable to sleep. The guest room was comfortable enough, but her mind kept replaying Eduardo's appearance, his threats, the sound of Marina's voice on the phone. Giving up on sleep, she slipped out of bed and padded quietly to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was dark and silent, moonlight streaming through the windows and casting long shadows across the floor. As she stood at the sink, glass in hand, she heard a soft footstep behind her. Turning quickly, her heart in her throat, she was relieved to see Caio rather than the intruder her paranoid mind had conjured. "Sorry," he said, his voice low. "I didn't mean to startle you. I heard someone moving around and wanted to check." "I couldn't sleep," Livia explained, setting down her glass. "Too much on my mind." Caio nodded understandingly. "Me too." He was wearing only pajama pants, his chest bare in the moonlight. Livia tried not to stare, but it was hard not to notice the strong lines of his shoulders, the definition of muscle that came from years of physical labor rather than gym workouts. "Are you okay?" he asked, moving closer. "Today was a lot." "I'm scared," Livia admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. "Not just of Eduardo, but of what he represents. The past I thought I'd escaped, the hold he still has. Over Marina. We'll figure it out," Caio promised, "one step at a time." In the silver-blue light of the moon, his face looked younger, the worry lines smoothed away. His eyes, though, held the same warmth, the same steadiness that had drawn her to him from the beginning. "Why are you doing this?" Livia asked suddenly. "Taking on my problems, putting yourself and Benicio at risk. You barely know me." Caio was quiet for a moment, considering her question. "When Helena died," he said finally, "I was lost, drowning in grief and guilt and unanswered questions. The only thing that kept me going was Benicio. He needed me to be strong, to keep putting one foot in front of the other. He moved closer, close enough that Livia could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. And then you appeared in our lives, and suddenly I was feeling things again. Not just surviving, but actually wanting more. Hoping for more. "Caio," Livia whispered, her heart pounding. "I know the timing is terrible," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I know we both have ghosts we're still fighting, but when I'm with you I feel like maybe the future could be better than the past, like maybe we both deserve another chance at happiness." His words touched something deep inside her, a hope she'd thought Eduardo had killed forever. The hope that she could be loved, truly loved, by someone who saw her strength rather than exploited her vulnerabilities. Without thinking, she reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Caio caught her hand in his, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers up her arm. "I don't want to rush you," he murmured. "I know you're dealing with so much right now." "I don't feel rushed," Livia assured him, stepping closer. "I feel safe with you." The words seemed to break something open between them. Caio's arms went around her waist, drawing her against him as his lips found hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepening with a hunger that matched her own. Livia wound her arms around his neck, letting herself be swept away by the sensation of his mouth on hers, his hands warm and strong against her back. It had been so long since she'd been touched with tenderness rather than possession, with desire rather than demand. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Caio rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you brought Benio home," he confessed. Livia smiled, feeling a happiness she'd almost forgotten was possible. "Me too." He kissed her again, more briefly this time, then stepped back reluctantly. "We should try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be another long day." "You're right," Livia agreed, though the last thing she wanted was to return to her solitary bed. "Good night, Caio." "Good night, Livia." As she turned to go back to the guest room, a small voice froze them both in place. "Livia, Papa?" Benio stood in the hallway clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, his eyes wide in the darkness. "Hey, buddy," Caio said, his voice carefully casual. "What are you doing up?" "I had a bad dream," the boy explained, rubbing his eyes. "The mean man from today was trying to take Livia away." Livia's heart clenched at the child's words. Even in his innocence, Benio had sensed the threat Eduardo posed. "It was just a dream," she assured him, kneeling down to his level. "I'm right here." "Can you stay forever?" Benio asked hopefully. "Then the mean man can't take you away." Livia glanced up at Caio, unsure how to respond to such a direct question. To her surprise, he knelt down beside her, looking his son in the eye. "Livia has her own house, remember?" he explained gently. "But she's staying with us tonight as our special guest, and she'll be around plenty of other days too." "Promise?" Benio asked, looking at Livia with such trust that it made her chest ache. "I promise," she said, though a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that it was a promise she might not be able to keep. "Okay," the boy said, seemingly satisfied. "Can I have some water?" "Of course," Caio replied, clearly relieved by the change of subject. "Let's get you a drink and then back to bed." As Caio led Benio to the kitchen, Livia headed back to the guest room, her mind and heart full. She'd come to this small town seeking escape, seeking anonymity. Instead, she'd found connection, found people who made her want to stay and fight rather than run. Whatever Eduardo was planning, she wouldn't face it alone this time. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the events of the previous day feeling almost like a bad dream in the warm sunlight. Livia woke to the sounds of the household stirring, Benio's high-pitched chatter, Caio's deeper responses, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine this could be her life. Waking up in this house, being part of this family. It was a dangerous thought, a vulnerable one. But after last night's kiss, it was hard not to let herself hope. She dressed quickly in the clothes she'd worn the day before and made her way to the kitchen, where Caio was making pancakes while Benio set the table with Isis's help. "Good morning," Caio said, his smile warming when he saw her, though he kept his tone casual in front of his son and sister. "Morning," Livia replied, fighting a blush as memories of their moonlit encounter flooded back. "Livia!" Benicio exclaimed, abandoning his task to run to her. "Papa made dinosaur pancakes. Do you want one?" "Dinosaur pancakes sound perfect," she assured him, ruffling his hair. Breakfast was a surprisingly normal affair, with Benicio dominating the conversation and the adults carefully avoiding any mention of Eduardo or the previous day's drama. Even Isis seemed more relaxed, passing Livia the maple syrup with a small but genuine smile. After they'd eaten, Caio announced that he needed to check on some cattle in the north pasture. "It shouldn't take more than an hour," he told Livia. "Then we can go into town, talk to the sheriff about a restraining order." "I'll come with you," Isis offered unexpectedly. "To the pasture, I mean. I could use some fresh air, and Benicio loves riding in the truck." The suggestion was clearly meant to give Livia some time alone, a gesture of trust that wasn't lost on her. "I'll clean up here," she offered. "Take your time." After they left, Livia busied herself washing the breakfast dishes and straightening up the kitchen. It felt strangely domestic, moving around Caio's home as if she belonged there. Dangerous. Thinking, she reminded herself. One kiss didn't make her part of this family, no matter how right it had felt. As she was drying the last plate, the doorbell rang. Livia froze, her heart immediately racing. Could it be Eduardo again? Had he come back to force the issue? She set down the plate carefully and moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtain. A police car sat in the driveway, a uniformed officer standing on the porch. Relief washed over her. Caio must have called the sheriff before leaving, asked them to check on her. Taking a deep breath to calm her nerves, Livia went to answer the door. The officer was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Morning, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "I'm Deputy Rodriguez. Is Caio Mendez available?" He's out checking the cattle," Livia explained. "I'm Livia Martinez. He should be back within the hour if you'd like to wait." The deputy nodded, seeming unsurprised. "Actually, Ms. Martinez, it's you I needed to speak with. May I come in?" Something in his tone made Livia hesitate, but she stepped back, opening the door wider. "Of course, is something wrong?" The deputy entered, removing his hat as he stepped into the living room. "I'm afraid I have some troubling news. We received a call this morning from a Dr. Eduardo Vasconcelos. He's filed a missing persons report for you in São Paulo, claiming you left against medical advice and may be a danger to yourself or others." Livia felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not true," she protested. "Eduardo is my ex. He's been stalking me, trying to control me. I left São Paulo to get away from him." The deputy's expression was sympathetic, but professional. "I understand, ma'am, and I'm not here to take sides. But Dr. Vasconcelos provided some concerning documentation, medical records, sworn statements from your sister, even a court order granting him temporary guardianship due to your alleged mental health issues. Those documents are fake," Livia insisted, her voice rising with panic. "Or coerced. Eduardo is a manipulator. He's turned my sister against me, and now he's trying to use the system to force me back." "I want to believe you," Deputy Rodriguez said, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. "But I need to follow protocol here. Dr. Vasconcelos is on his way, with a representative from the State Mental Health Authority. They've requested that you remain here until they arrive to assess the situation." "You're detaining me?" Livia asked incredulously. "Based on the word of a man you've never met?" "Not detaining, ma'am. Just asking you to voluntarily wait for them to arrive. We can sort this all out once everyone's together." Livia's mind raced. This was Eduardo's play, using his medical credentials and connections to paint her as unstable, to legally force her back under his control, and she had walked right into it by opening the door. "When will they be here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Within the hour," the deputy replied. "They were leaving the regional hospital when I got the call. An hour, Caio would be back by then. He would help her, stand up for her. All she had to do was stall." "All right," she said finally. "I'll wait. But I want to call my lawyer first." She didn't have a lawyer, but the deputy didn't need to know that. He nodded, seemingly relieved that she wasn't going to make this difficult. "That's your right, ma'am." I'll wait outside to give you privacy." As soon as the deputy stepped onto the porch, Livia rushed to find her phone. She needed to warn Caio, tell him what was happening, but when she reached for her cell in her purse, it wasn't there. Panic rising, she dumped the contents of her bag onto the couch. No phone. She must have left it at the clinic yesterday in her rush to meet Caio and Benicio for their hike. Frantic now, she looked for Caio's landline, but the base was empty, the handset missing. Had Eduardo anticipated this? Had he somehow removed her means of communication? The house phone was her only lifeline, her only way to reach Caio before Eduardo arrived. Without it, she was truly trapped. Desperately, she searched the kitchen drawers, the bedrooms, even looking under furniture. Nothing. The handset was nowhere to be found. Through the window, she could see the deputy pacing on the porch, occasionally glancing at his watch. Time was running out. In a last-ditch effort, she ran to Benicio's room, hoping against hope that the boy might have taken the phone for one of his games. She rifled through his toy box, looked under his bed, in his closet, and there, on his bedside, table partially hidden by a stuffed dinosaur, was a piece of paper that made her blood run cold. It was a child's drawing, done in colorful crayon, showing a car crashed against a tree. Beside it, in childish handwriting, were the words, "Mama's accident." But what froze Livia's blood wasn't the drawing itself. It was what lay beneath it. A stack of photographs clearly taken with a professional camera with a zoom lens. Photos of Helena, Caio's late wife, meeting with a man in various locations, a cafe, a park, outside a hotel. The man was Eduardo. As the realization of what she was seeing hit her, the front door opened and a familiar voice called out, "Deputy, is everything all right? I believe the patient may be having an episode." Eduardo had arrived, and with him, the terrible truth about Helena's death, a truth that would destroy everything Livia had begun to build here. "In here, Dr. Vasconcelos," the deputy called back. "Ms. Martinez is just making a phone call." Livia stood frozen, the photographs in her trembling hands, as footsteps approached Benicio's room. She had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The door swung open and Eduardo stood there, his face a mask of concern that didn't reach his cold eyes. "There you are, my dear," he said softly. "It's time to come home." "Eduardo, please," Livia whispered, clutching the photographs to her chest. "What did you do to Helena?" Eduardo's practiced smile faltered for just a moment, then returned with a coldness that sent shivers down her spine. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're confused, Livia, delusional, just like your doctors have been saying." He stepped into the room, closing the distance between them with deliberate slowness. "Deputy," he called over his shoulder, "I think we need to sedate her. She's having paranoid delusions again." "Wait," Livia said desperately, holding up the photographs. "These are pictures of you with Caio's wife, Helena, the woman who died in a car accident 2 years ago. You knew her." The deputy appeared in the doorway behind Eduardo, his expression confused. "Dr. Vasconcelos? What's she talking about?" Eduardo's face hardened. "She's making connections that don't exist. This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I warned you about. In her condition, she sees conspiracies everywhere." He reached for the photos, but Livia backed away, her legs hitting Benicio's small bed. "Deputy Rodriguez, please look at these," she begged. "This man knew Helena Mendez before she died. There's something wrong here." The deputy hesitated, clearly torn between his duty to follow procedure and the genuine distress in Livia's voice. "Dr. Vasconcelos, perhaps we should—" "There's no need," Eduardo interrupted sharply. "My team is waiting outside with the appropriate medication. Once she's calmer, we can all discuss this rationally." He turned to Livia, his voice softening to that persuasive tone she knew all too well. "Livia, my dear, you know you're not well. Let us help you." The familiar words, the ones he'd used countless times to make her doubt herself, to control her, washed over her. But this time they didn't sink in. This time she had evidence in her hands that Eduardo was lying, that he was connected to Helena's death somehow. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said firmly. "And when Caio gets back, you're going to have to explain why you have pictures of his dead wife." Something dangerous flashed in Eduardo's eyes, a glimpse of the rage he usually kept carefully hidden. He lunged forward suddenly, grabbing her wrist with bruising force. "That's enough," he hissed, his voice low enough that the deputy couldn't hear. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be." "Dr. Vasconcelos," the deputy said sharply, "I'm going to have to ask you to step back. Whatever your relationship with Ms. Martinez, you can't put hands on her like that." Eduardo released Livia's wrist, his face instantly transforming back into the concerned doctor. "Of course, you're right, I apologize. It's just difficult to see her like this. We were going to be married." The sound of a vehicle pulling into the driveway interrupted the tense standoff. Through the window, Livia could see Caio's truck, with Isis and Benicio inside. "That's Caio," she told the deputy. "Helena's husband. Ask him about these photographs." Eduardo's composure slipped again, a flicker of genuine fear crossing his face. He hadn't expected Caio to return so soon. The front door opened, and Benicio's voice rang through the house. "Livia! We saw baby cows! They were so cute and—" His excited chatter cut off abruptly as he entered the living room and saw the deputy and Eduardo. His small face crumpled with fear. "Papa, it's the mean man again!" Caio appeared behind his son, his expression darkening when he saw Eduardo. "What's going on here?" he demanded, stepping protectively in front of Benicio. "Mr. Mendez," the deputy began. "I'm Deputy Rodriguez. I'm here because Dr. Vasconcelos has filed some concerning paperwork regarding Ms. Martinez's mental health. He has documents suggesting he has legal guardianship due to her condition." "That's ridiculous," Caio said flatly. "Livia is perfectly fine. This man is harassing her." "That's not for you to decide," Eduardo interjected smoothly. "I have the proper authorization. Your involvement with my patient is inappropriate and potentially damaging to her recovery." Isis appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "What's happening?" Livia seized the moment of confusion to push past Eduardo, the photographs still clutched in her hand. "Caio," she said urgently, "I found these in Benicio's room. Look." She thrust the photos into his hands. Caio's face went pale as he flipped through them, seeing his late wife in clearly intimate situations with Eduardo. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "How do you know my wife?" Eduardo's calm facade finally cracked. "She came to me as a patient," he said defensively. "Doctor-patient confidentiality prevents me from saying more." "These don't look like doctor-patient meetings," Caio said coldly, holding up a photo of Eduardo and Helena embracing outside a hotel. "These look like an affair." The deputy moved closer, looking over Caio's shoulder at the photographs. "Dr. Vasconcelos, I think we need to sort this out before proceeding with anything regarding Ms. Martinez." Eduardo's expression hardened. "This changes nothing. Livia is still under my legal guardianship. These photos are irrelevant to her condition." "They're not irrelevant if you knew Helena," Livia argued, "if you had some connection to her death." "Death?" Eduardo laughed, but there was a hollow, brittle quality to it. "Helena died in a car accident. Everyone knows that." "Did she?" Caio asked quietly. "Because I've always had questions about that night, about why she was out driving alone on that particular road, so far from town, about why there were no skid marks, no sign she tried to brake before hitting that tree." A heavy silence fell over the room. Even Benicio seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, pressing closer to his father's side. "You think I had something to do with Helena's death?" Eduardo asked incredulously. "That's absurd. I was in São Paulo when it happened." "Were you?" Isis spoke up suddenly, her eyes narrowed. "Because I remember Caio mentioning the police report said a dark sedan was seen in the area that night, a car that didn't belong to anyone local." Eduardo's face twitched. "This is ridiculous. Deputy, I insist you do your job and help me transport this mentally unstable woman to a proper facility." But Deputy Rodriguez was looking at Eduardo with new suspicion. "Dr. Vasconcelos, I think we need to continue this conversation down at the station. There seem to be some connections here that warrant further investigation." "You can't be serious," Eduardo sputtered. "Based on what? Some old photos? A grieving husband's conspiracy theories?" "Based on the fact that you conveniently forgot to mention you knew the deceased wife of the man whose house we're standing in. the deputy replied evenly. And the fact that Ms. Martinez, who you claim is delusional, seems remarkably coherent. To me, Eduardo's composure completely shattered, his face contorted with rage as he pointed at Livia. This is your fault. You've always been trouble, always questioning, never knowing your place. Just like your sister. My sister? Livia asked, a cold dread settling in her stomach. What about Marina? So concerned about Marina, Eduardo sneered, always trying to save her. Did you ever stop to think maybe she doesn't want to be saved? Maybe she likes her life with me? Where is she? Livia demanded, stepping toward him. What have you done with Marina? Eduardo's smile was chilling. Nothing she didn't agree to. Marina knows her place, unlike you. She understands the consequences of defiance. The implied threat hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Caio moved forward, placing himself between Eduardo and Livia. I think you should leave now, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Before I forget, there's a law officer present. For a tense moment, it seemed Eduardo might lash out. Then, with visible effort, he regained a semblance of control. This isn't over, he said softly. Not by a long shot. Actually it is, came a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a young woman standing there, her face pale but determined. She was thin, almost fragile looking, with dark circles under her eyes and a fading bruise on her cheek. But her resemblance to Livia was unmistakable. Marina? Livia gasped, hardly daring to believe her eyes. Marina stepped into the room, keeping a wary distance from Eduardo. I heard everything, she said, her voice shaking slightly. About Helena. About what you've been doing to Livia. It's over, Eduardo. Eduardo's face drained of color. Marina, what are you doing here? How did you find this place? Marina finished for him. I followed you. I've been following you for days, ever since I found those. She nodded toward the photographs in Caio's hands. You kept them in your desk, along with others. Pictures of women who trusted you, who ended up hurt. Or worse. You're lying, Eduardo hissed. Deputy, she's as unstable as her sister. They both need professional help. I don't think so, Deputy Rodriguez said, his hand moving to the handcuffs on his belt. Dr. Vasconcelos, I'm going to need you to come with me to the station to answer some questions about Helena Mendez and about these allegations of abuse and falsified medical records. Eduardo's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape route. Finding none, he lunged suddenly at Marina, grabbing her arm. Tell them. You're lying, he demanded. Tell them or you'll regret it. The deputy moved quickly, pulling Eduardo away from Marina and securing his hands behind his back. That's assault, Doctor. You're not helping your case here. As the deputy led a protesting Eduardo out to the police car, Livia rushed to her. Sister, wrapping her arms around Marina's thin frame. I can't believe you're here, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I've been so worried about you. Marina hugged her back fiercely. I'm so sorry, Livia, for everything. For not believing you, for the things I said. Eduardo, he made me think you were the problem, that you were jealous, unstable. It wasn't until I found those pictures, realized what he might have done to that woman. It's okay, Livia soothed, stroking her sister's hair. You're here now, you're safe. Caio watched the reunion with a mix of emotions playing across his face. Relief that Livia was safe, confusion about his wife's connection to Eduardo, hope that finally there might be answers about Helena's death. Isis moved to his side, placing a hand on his arm. Are you okay? She asked quietly. Caio looked down at the photographs in his hands, at the evidence of his wife's betrayal. I don't know, he admitted. I suspected something was wrong before the accident. Helena was distant, secretive, but I never imagined. Who's that lady? Benicio asked, pointing at Marina. She looks like Livia. That's my sister, sweetheart, Livia explained, wiping away tears. Marina, this is Benicio, and this is his father, Caio, and his aunt, Isis. Marina nodded to them, clearly exhausted and overwhelmed. I'm sorry to barge in like this. I didn't know what else to do. When I found those pictures, when I realized what Eduardo might be capable of, you did the right thing, Caio assured her. Those photos, they might help explain what really happened to Helena. Outside, they heard the police car start up. and drive away, taking Eduardo with it. The immediate danger was gone, but the questions remained. About Helena's death, about Eduardo's role in it, about what would happen next. "You both should sit down," Isis said practically, leading the way to the living room. "I'll make some tea, we have a lot to talk about." As they settled onto the couch, Benicio climbed into Livia's lap, seemingly unaware of the gravity of the situation. "Are you still sad?" he asked, touching her tear-stained cheek with a small hand. "Not sad," Livia assured him, hugging him close. "Just relieved. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy too. Like when Papa cries sometimes looking at Mama's." "Pictures?" the boy asked innocently. Caio's face flushed, but he nodded. "Something like that, son." Once Isis returned with tea, they began to piece together what had happened. Marina explained how she'd found the photographs in Eduardo's desk while searching for her passport, which he'd hidden to prevent her from traveling. "There were others too," she said, her hands trembling around her teacup. "Women I didn't recognize. And journals detailing his relationships, how he manipulated them, controlled them. Helena's name was in there. He wrote about how she wanted to end things, how she threatened to tell her husband." Caio's face hardened. The night of the accident, Helena said she needed to run an errand. She seemed nervous but determined. She said when she got back, "We needed to talk about our future." According to Eduardo's journal, they were meeting that night. Marina continued. "She was going to tell him it was over for good, that she was going to confess everything to you. And instead she ended up dead," Caio said, his voice hollow. "A single car accident on a straight stretch of road she'd driven 100 times. Do you think he—" Isis couldn't finish the question, her eyes wide with horror. "I don't know," Marina admitted. "The journal doesn't say explicitly, but there was an entry the day after her death. It just said, 'Problem solved.' Moving on." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of Benicio playing with a toy car on the floor, blissfully unaware of the dark revelations swirling around him. "We need to take this to the police," Caio said finally. "All of it. The photos, what Marina knows about the journals. They need to reopen the investigation into Helena's death." "Will that bring her back?" Isis asked softly. "No," Caio acknowledged, his expression somber. "But it might bring justice and closure." Livia watched him, seeing the pain etched in his features, but also a kind of relief, the relief of finally understanding, of having his suspicions confirmed rather than continuing to question his own perceptions. "What happens now?" she asked, looking between Caio and Marina. "Eduardo won't go down without a fight. He has connections, resources. Now we fight back," Caio said firmly. "Together. No more running, no more hiding." "I don't have anywhere to go," Marina admitted, looking small and lost. "I left everything behind when I followed Eduardo here." "You'll stay with me," Livia said immediately. "At the Santiago place. There's plenty of room." "Actually," Isis spoke up, surprising everyone, "I've been thinking about moving back to the city. My old company has been asking me to return. With everything that's happened, maybe it's time for me to build my own life again." Caio looked at his sister with a mixture of surprise and understanding. "Are you sure, Isis? This has always been your home too." "It will still be my home," she assured him, "but not my entire life. You and Benicio, you don't need me the way you used to." Her eyes flickered to Livia, and there was acceptance in her gaze. "You have others to lean on now." "So Marina could stay in your room," Benicio concluded, looking up from his toys with the simple logic of a child. "And Livia could stay in the guest room, then everyone would be together." The adults exchanged awkward glances, the boys innocent, suggestion highlighting the complicated adult realities they faced. "It's not quite that simple, buddy," Caio explained gently, "but we'll figure something out." Later, after Benicio had been put to bed and Marina had fallen asleep in Isis's room, exhausted from her ordeal, Livia and Caio found themselves alone on the porch. The night was clear and cool, stars blanketing the sky above them. "What a day," Livia sighed, leaning against the porch railing. "I still can't believe Marina is here, that Eduardo is in custody, that all of this is connected to Helena somehow." "Life is strange that way," Caio said, standing beside her. Connections we never see until they're right in front of us. Like us? Livia asked softly, turning to face him. Caio reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Like us, he agreed. When you found Benicio that day in the woods, I never imagined how much would change. How you would change me. Was just trying to restart my life, Livia admitted. Find somewhere quiet and safe to heal. I never expected to find a family. Is that what we are? Caio asked, his voice low and serious. A family? Livia hesitated, the question hanging between them like a fragile, precious thing. I want us to be, she said finally. But there's so much happening right now. Eduardo, the investigation. Marina, those things will work themselves out, Caio assured her. What matters is what we want, what we feel. And what do you feel? Livia asked, her heart pounding. In answer, Caio leaned forward and kissed her. A kiss full of promise and certainty, of shared pain and newfound hope. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I feel like my life started again the day you found my son, he whispered. Like everything before was just preparing me for you. Even the pain? Livia asked. The loss? Even that, Caio nodded. It shaped us, made us who we are, brought us to this moment. Inside the house, a small figure appeared at the window, Benicio in his pajamas, watching them with wide, curious eyes. When he saw them looking, he waved enthusiastically, then pressed his hands to the glass in the shape of a heart. Livia laughed, the sound clear and joyful in the night air. I think we have approval from the most important judge. He adores you, Caio smiled, almost as much as I do. The word hung between them, unspoken but understood. It was too soon for declarations of love, too fresh after all they'd been through. But it was there, growing stronger each day, a promise of what could be. What happens tomorrow? Livia asked. With Eduardo, with the investigation? Tomorrow we start fighting for justice, Caio said. For Helena, for Marina, for you, it won't be easy. Eduardo won't go down without a struggle. I'm not afraid anymore, Livia said, realizing as she spoke that it was true. Not with you beside me. Caio took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. Then we face it together, whatever comes next. As they stood on the porch, hands linked and hearts aligned, the future stretched before them, uncertain but full of possibility. There would be challenges ahead, battles to fight, wounds still to heal. But for the first time in a long time, Livia felt truly hopeful. She had come to this small town seeking refuge, a place to hide from her past. Instead, she had found the courage to face it. She had found a little boy lost in the woods, and in saving him, had somehow saved herself. Caio squeezed her hand gently as if reading her thoughts. You saved my son, he said softly, echoing the words he'd spoken that first day. And you won my world. Inside the house, Benicio had fallen asleep, with his cheek pressed against the window, a small smile on his face. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own revelations. But tonight, under a blanket of stars, a new family was taking shape, built not from perfect circumstances, but from broken pieces made stronger where they had been mended. And now that was enough. 3 months later, as summer turned to autumn, Livia stood in the courtroom, her hand firmly clasped in Caio's as they awaited the judge's decision. Marina sat on her other side, her face still thin but her eyes clear and determined. Eduardo sat at the defense table, his once impeccable appearance now rumpled, his confident smile replaced by a scowl. The evidence against him had mounted, Marina's testimony, the journal she had managed to preserve, the reopened investigation into Helena's death that had revealed tampered brake lines and suspicious financial transactions. In the matter of the state versus Eduardo Vasconcelos, the judge began, this court finds the defendant guilty on all counts. As the sentence was read, 20 years without possibility of parole, Livia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was over, finally truly over. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, but they slipped away through a side entrance where Isis waited with Benicio in Caio's truck. "Did the bad man get punished?" Benicio asked as they climbed in. "Yes, sweetheart," Livia told him, settling into the seat beside him. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." The boy nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we go home now? Papa said we could have ice cream to celebrate." "Definitely," Caio agreed, starting the engine. "Ice cream first, then home." Home. The word still sent a thrill through Livia. 3 months ago, she had moved into the farmhouse permanently, not as a guest, but as part of the family. Marina had taken over the Santiago place, slowly rebuilding her confidence and independence with the support of her sister nearby. And Isis had indeed returned to the city, though she visited often, her relationship with Livia transforming from suspicion to genuine friendship. The family was unusual, pieced together from broken parts but stronger for having been tested by fire. As they drove away from the courthouse, leaving the past behind them, Livia looked at Caio, at his profile silhouetted against the autumn landscape, at his hand resting on hers between the seats. "You okay?" he asked, glancing at her. "Better than okay," she assured him. "I'm home." Behind them, the sun set on one chapter of their lives and rose on another, one filled with healing, with hope, and with the kind of love that saves, that rebuilds, that wins worlds one broken heart at a time. The end.